Hello everyone watching YouTube. What is up, guys? We got ourselves a best of 5 TvZ. This was the most recent finals of the Korean Open Cup. An Open Cup that I don't really get to do because I am old and it's past my bedtime when it starts. So definitely not going until 2 in the morning to cast till the very, very end. But I still love Korean StarCraft, and thankfully the uploads to the shared dock between all the casters is actually running smoothly. So we do have all of the games for today's finals. So it starts off on Tropical Sacrifice in the top right. We got Solar going for a pool first. And the bottom left, it is GuMiHo just going for a 1 Rex expand. So Solar just announced, I think, as of today, which was August 21st, there we go, that he's on Onside Gaming. So just a little bit after, I guess, the Open Cup actually happens. But yeah, that is now his official team, which is a very good pickup, and it just makes a lot of sense as well. Onside looking to bring on more people. Solar left Kaizi Gaming, and it just seemed like a perfect fit. But yes, that means that he is on a very good team with the likes of Neeb and Maru as well. So quite a good trifecta of all the races. With their forces combined, maybe they'll do good things, I guess. Not really. A team game, though, StarCraft 2, but there's like World Team League, which I think they express interest in signing up for. But anyways, that's outside of this best of 5. The pool first might have been a little bit of a scared move, as in just afraid of a 2-Rex, right? But I actually feel like Zerg players are once again experimenting with just going for the pool first to really bother the Terran players. I mean, this bothers them in a few different ways. Obviously, when you dedicate fully to 6 lings, so if he only went for 2, or hell, even 0, I would say that would totally be because he was just concerned about a 2-Rex, and that was all he really wanted to do. But even if you were primarily concerned about a 2-Rex, then you still went into 6 lings. It doesn't mean that you weren't scared of a 2-Rex. Regardless, like, if you do just want to set off 6 lings to your opponent, then chances are they're going to delay the command center, as we can see here. They definitely have the ability to kill a single Marine, so a bit of a greedy opener from GuMiHo. And then if it was a Reaper opener, then they just drawn the Reaper back home, and while they probably can't kill the Reaper, it does cause a decent amount of chaos. In this case, 2 SCVs go down, which is a pretty, I don't know, mediocre defense. I mean, it's just such a weird scenario because only 1 Marine was available, not 2, not the Reaper again. So yeah, it turns things a little bit weird, but I guess very perfect defense would have been like microing the SCVs in time to save them. But I just don't know if that's possible. When you consider human fault, I guess. So we'll just say that 2 SCVs is fine enough to lose. Also, that delayed time on the building command center kind of hurts. And GuMiHo kind of had to mess up his build a little bit as well. This is interesting. So the barracks made a tech lab, not a reactor. So I was thinking that was actually a reactor building, and then only 1 Hellion can pop out while you wait for the reactor to build because it's delayed. And it's not that. It is just GuMiHo, I mean, really not bothering to get a lot of Hellions. Not immediately, anyways. In favor for faster Banshees. Presumably faster, anyways. This is, it's interesting. I have to look into exactly what's, how much of a difference this makes. But anyways, this is GuMiHo's choice. He gets to do it. Solar going into a 2-base 4 gas setup is actually very interesting. Here was looking at the difference of the Terran build order, which he still is doing some very different things. Tech lab on the factory, reactor on the barracks does not swap off, and into a 3rd CC. So very different play from both parties. And both these guys do sign up for a lot of tournaments that maybe aren't like the most prestigious, so maybe we miss out in a lot of the games they played against each other. Gotta imagine they're still hitting each other on ladder a whole lot. Although if they know it's them, like, that's a big question mark. But anyways, there might be a lot more mind games going into this than usual. Solar, certainly not, I think, designated as a weird, tricky Zerg player. Might be playing a little bit out of his comfort zone, but in reaction not just to what he's seen, but also into playing against GuMiHo specifically. Otherwise, Zerg players, none of them really, not even like Bly or Scarlet, really does 2-base Spire builds anymore, and they were the ones doing it, I feel like, for an extended period of time. You know, past everyone else saying, like, it's not that great. So this is very interesting from Solar. Just, I feel like it is completely out of character, but again, maybe thinking about something else that's happened versus GuMiHo. That Overseer just got a full scout, however, so up until that point, all I knew was that a 1-Rex expand, that there weren't that many Hellions, and then the Banshee appeared, which was easily shoved off. So there might have been a little bit of like him and hawing between those moments, but now Solar knows exactly what his opponent's doing, which is actually going into barracks. So I'm just thinking if maybe 2-base Spire would do well against a battlecruiser opener, and it's like, does it? Pretty sure no. If it's a single battlecruiser, then Queens can do it. If it's a double battlecruiser build, but I don't know, going 2-base corrupt there actually gives you a lot to work with. So I think that is just the choice for Solar today. Aggression into aggression, the form of the ground and then the form of the air. And might be setting GuMiHo a little off kilter. He did scout the Spire with the Banshee though, so should be set up and exactly that. And insert in the main base, insert in the natural, just missed the third one because the third hasn't been planted down yet. Solo's going to take what he can get, which are a couple of add-ons, which shouldn't be underestimated. That is a big bother when Terrans start losing reactors. But well-placed Widowmine number 1 gets one of them muted, and the other one died to another Widowmine? Or maybe just Marines and a missile turret. Either way, not the best start for Solar, who really probably wanted it to be hidden a little while longer, although you can only hide it so much anyways. If the Hellions are scouting the late third, questions do start to arise in the Terran's head, like what the hell's going on. And that's probably why GuMiHo was especially frantic about getting the Banshee in the natural. Not usually a point of harassment for Banshees. Maybe on some maps, but yeah, this one, I guess there's a lot of dead space in the back. Maybe he just always does that. But it still also rewarded him with that Spire Scout. So GuMiHo's got 3 bases locked up, going into a 4th base actually pretty quickly in those combat shields. He did get an armory first, so I was noting that while talking about the double 2-base Spire build. Again, both of them are doing things just a little bit differently than you might expect in today's meta, and then some, actually. So again, GuMiHo with his opener was a bit odd, but then he also adds another odd piece to the puzzle, which was a faster armory. So that armory actually completed before, I believe, his +1 attack was done. And it looks like he's just going to go ahead and fully dedicate to +2 attack, and then, despite having double engineering base for getting armor at the least, I don't know. That can't be on purpose if I get 2 engineering base. But the armory would have given him Hellbats, but then he never made very many Hellions to begin with, right? Because of the whole opener that he did. So did he want to go into Widowmine drops? That is probably what was the case. And then he saw that it was a 2-base Spire and said it's not worth it to try and do drops. That's my expectation anyways. But it now results in a weird-looking production tab where, again, we do have 2 engineering bays, but only 1 bio upgrade, and then I guess, you know, what is kind of a faster +1 armor for the mech. I mean, that can come in with a 3 or 4 base Terran play. That's not that surprising. It's just the timing of it and the notable lack of +1 armor. There we go. There we go. Finally on the way. A lot of Marauders. Did I just see that right? 2 tech labs instead of 4 out of 5 being reactors. GuMiHo has been playing around with more massive bio styles of play. And it does look like he once again is doing it here. So a little bit of this, like now this is basically a hit squad. Initially it was kind of a decent push, but it's been a while, so now more of a clean up squad, clearing up that creep. Solar, just a remark on what the Zerg is doing, has been macroing really well, right? So you have that hiccup while you're getting from your 2-base Spire into 3 and 4 bases, which can be kind of scary, just in case your mutas don't really do a lot pressure-wise, which, you know, really they didn't. So you got to make sure to get the triple hooks fast, which he did, and then just kind of play smart, and Solar did. So he actually gets up to 4 bases, 85 drones, and is trying to double expand on top of that. almost guarantees that one of these bases comes up. Not that one, though. Not the bottom right one. So that's the update for the Zerg out there. And actually, the muta count got to 13. That's not too bad. But I do wonder if the mutas are... I don't know. If they've really done enough to... Well, actually, maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe it doesn't matter. I was gonna say, the mutas still are not that amazing. 11 SCVs is decent, but it's their first time really doing anything, and that's when GuMiHo is already on 4 bases, right? So even though we didn't have maybe a more typical mid-game push that could have really scared a fast muta player, we're having still a maxed out Terran with, you know, maybe lopsided upgrades, but still upgrades 2-1. And against a pure Ling Baneling muta player, right? So that can be very scary for the Zerg, although usually the upgrades are better for the Terran. That's certainly true. Just the chonkiness of the army that GuMiHo has built up can be very intimidating. All these Marauders added in, especially if they're very well controlled, suddenly the Banelings pop off on them. Or try to not pop off on them, and then they just die to the Marauders killing them. That can actually be what happens. Either way, point is, it takes more than you might expect, right? Against pure Marine, maybe you just get those decent shots, but against just every bio unit available, Marauders are chonky, and just the amount of bio can be intimidating. You don't have to worry so much about Widow Mines or tanks, as we see here, there's only a couple on the field, but that was a good concave, a decent split there from GuMiHo, and Solar needs round number 2, and maybe even round number 3. It's going to dive in here. Another last-second split is going to try and keep GuMiHo on this side of the map, but he is forced to abandon ship. All the medevacs boost off to the left side, past a couple of Widow Mines too, so if Solar had chase, it might have not turned out so well for him. And that is technically a hold on the Zerg side, but a very expensive one, and their economy maybe isn't all the best. Banking a little bit right now, 81 workers, I guess is okay, but oversaturation started to become a problem during that push, so really got to get this 5th base up and running. And GuMiHo has done an excellent job of keeping the creep spread to minimal. I mean, this does not even look like a professional Zerg player's creep spread, right? It just doesn't, it's not good. It is not good at all. Solar has, despite his economy looking good for a while, despite, you know, the fact that he did get up to Hive, he's got upgrades on the way from the Hive, it still has been a Zerg player on the back foot more so. And not because of anything drastic, I guess, as much as I feel like it was due to, one, the muta's not doing a whole lot, so it's not like Solar ever really had control over the game, but then two, GuMiHo bringing out kind of a newer style of play, one that has Zerg players having to adapt, I suppose, to the kind of different pacing that comes with it. Now, eventually, in any Terran versus Zerg matchup, you're going to get to your 6th, 7th, and 8th barracks, all providing Marauders. So this army is not that rare now that we're 13 minutes into the game. But earlier on, it definitely was outside the norm, I guess. The 2-tank push into maybe tanks or Widow Mines, and then mass Marine. Until you have those last 3 barracks done, it's chonkier earlier on. And actually, despite having 1 factory, which would be the downside to this style of play, GuMiHo has had really good Widow Mine retention by the looks of things. So 9 have gone down, but I guess if you're really consistent, that's still not a lot. Yeah, so he still has 14 Widow Mines on the field. Because I think that would be the one really dangerous thing, is that you really aren't covered by a lot of splash. Sometimes. In this case, not a worry. Plenty of splash to work with. Solar having to try and do something about that. Tries his best to split, but all of this is off of creep as well. And it just seems like a losing game for Solar. Yeah, absolutely. Might be able to clean up the entirety of that right side army, but the very important 5th base and all of the drones that are moved over there, they're in trouble. Looks like a couple of units were saved in the medevacs. The mutas could have taken most of them out, but they were trying to go elsewhere. Yeah, they weren't chasing, and then maybe they thought they were chasing or something, because they're just dawdling in the middle of the map. So it's turned all types of awkward. So Solar could not really deal with the army and the army on the 5th base. That's just the way it went. But then also losing this bottom right base, maybe it was inevitable anyways. It was disconnected in many ways from the rest of the Zerg bases. So it probably was a goner no matter what. but it sucks to lose it in such a fashion. And GuMiHo, I think he's just looking for the kill moment. He's got a 5th base moving on over. I do believe that is legitimately a 5th base. Again, lots of production on the barracks go at the very least. And he did get up to 3-2 upgrades. And it just seems like Solar, without that creep spread especially, cannot take on this chunky of an army. Yeah. Ultras don't really stand a chance. Muta's trying to buy some more time, but it does not work. GG. GuMiHo takes number 1. And that was also, in a way, it was kind of one-sided. Again, Solar got to tech, he got to a decent economy, and he got to a maxed out state, but all of it missing some other critical features that maybe we'll see him improve on for game number 2. It is a best of 5, so still plenty of games to come. And we're back into it for game number 2. It is going to be on Moondance. Bottom right, we have Solar. Top left, GuMiHo. Both of them bringing out some weirder builds. I guess it was kind of more important weirder, I guess, on the side of Solar. GuMiHo did a couple of odd things, but maybe things that don't really sidetrack from the main Terran goal. Whereas Solar, I mean, going for a 2-base Spire, it's just super dedicated. That's the best way I can put it, the most simple way I can put it. It's super dedicated. GuMiHo went to a 1x expand, still got a 3rd CC after a 1-1 technology bump. That's the usual thing. That doesn't usually do. The fact that his starport might have been a little bit faster, the Banshee specifically might have been a little bit faster, or that his Hellion count was significantly lower than you would expect, I mean, those are definitely decisions that impact the game, but it's not such a hard turn left, right? It was more like kind of gliding across a I guess, weavy, is that a word? In and out pathway that still led to the same destination, where Solar just, it was like almost completely different destination. And the idea that Zerg players are usually trying to play that defensive game to get the super big economy, and then they can build whatever they want to build, right? If that's the general thing for Zerg, then that's not something that Solar was really doing. All signs from minute 0 did not point to Macroville, not immediately getting up to 85 drones, maybe with double upgrades. And that's not to say that it's wrong or bad for Zerg players to not choose to be super economical. I mean, cheese always has a place. Aggression has a place, especially some of those hard-to-read aggressions, like the big Baneling swell, where maybe you just can't quite determine if they're going to tech up on that hive or actually like continue hitting you over and over again. But in that case, I do think that it hurt Solar to do what he did far more than GuMiHo was hurt doing what he did. Now, that said, there's a couple other really important things that happened. Actually, right now we have GuMiHo going for a 2-Rax opener. So a 2-1-1, rather. Not an proxy or anything like that. But for Solar, you know, the Muta is not doing anything. I think sucked a lot for him, whereas for GuMiHo, the 2 Banshees not maybe doing a lot wasn't as sucky. And what they did, most importantly, was scout a Spire, which I think actually, like, almost is worth their cost. I mean, that's still pretty expensive, but still, they did something where the Mutas felt like they really struggled to do something. And then while it still gave Solar enough time to get to an economic stage, whoops-a-daisy, he got kind of the things you would expect as a Zerg player, again, on the economy and even the technology. Even the upgrades were ahead because GuMiHo, again, choosing some odd additions and subtractions from his build. One thing that Solar never had was, again, control over the game too much, despite those early mutas, and then that creep spread was abysmal. And then just going up against such an early, chunky army, I think is, it's just a different frame of mind, I think, for the Zerg players who might, you know, assume that they can go... Slipping a lot of SCVs. I'm believing that's on accident. Definitely make SCVs. That's weird. Oh, there we go. Weird. Okay, well, I mean, he's going to go for a different version of the 2-1-1, so... trying to wrap up my point. I guess... Yeah, for the Zerg players, I think that their expectations for a fight changes when it's that many Marauders a bit earlier on. But yeah, anyway, so I guess one of the reasons that we have some SCVs skipping is that we do actually have more being afforded. So the 2 Hellions popping out at a time, only 1 medevac, is a little bit more dedicated to a 2-1-1 build than any other alternative one. So the 2-1-1 and the 3cc double engineering bay, right, being really popular. But even, I mean, kind of compared to a 2-base attack, like a 2-base tank push after a 2-1-1, which I think can be popular on this map since it's so short. Even that, I mean, they're both still pretty dedicated, but this one is, I guess you can say, it's a bit cheesier. It is a bit cheesier. It's hard to read for the Zerg player unless they actually get up there into that main base. So, and it hits faster, of course, than the 2-base tank push, which maybe you could start picking up on signs for that. You can't really pick up on signs for this. Also, there knows that the 2-1-1, thanks to those lings, doesn't realize it's going to have Hellbats. So this was actually, I believe, a Ryung build way back in the day before, not before he retired, before he went to, I guess, a little AWOL. But yeah, anyways, it was a cool addition. Might have been before Ryung went to the military in general. But anyways, it's a cool addition. I have not actually seen it work in a little while. Fortunately for Solar, he does have those Banelings finishing up, and the Queens are able to buy enough time to make this kind of a no-brainer defense, honestly. 1 Queen went down, handful of Lings, and of course those Banelings sacrificed themselves to make sure that things were going to be okay, but that's completely fine. GuMiHo really dedicating to that. As I was saying, with the kind of cheese factor that's involved here. It's got to be unscouted and it's got to be fast to really be effective, I think, is some features of cheese. But then, you know, on top of that, the lack of SCV production, I mean, it's very dedicated. And GuMiHo did not do nearly as much damage as he was hoping for. Even the amount of time that it took to clean up, I mean, it was a bit haphazard. It was a bit, oh shit, for the Zerg side of things. But it still was cleaned up rather quickly thanks to those Banelings helping out. So now GuMiHo needs to do some fancy footwork with some drops, try and get some damage done there. Already not doing a particularly good job, as he loses some units in that main base. Just the tiniest little hit squad he'll ever see, trying to hit Solar's 4th base currently. It might actually get a cancel, weirdly enough. Solar just doesn't have enough to spread around currently with a drone round, I guess, taking up any army round he would have had. And this is going to go into pseudo-mech. All right then, GuMiHo. GuMiHo does whatever the hell GuMiHo wants. Looks like that 4th base was indeed canceled, or at least it was canceled, not killed. GuMiHo is trying to take a 3rd CC in the back where it is safe, and then transition over into mech, which is very cool, and again, very unique. So we do not have, in this StarCraft video game anyways, transitions from bio to mech, or of course vice versa doesn't happen too much either. I mean, I realize sometimes spooky mech can be almost all ghosts, but yeah, anyways. It's certainly not going to happen at this point. Maybe you're talking Supreme late game, 6 bases versus 6, trying to deal with Brood Lords, so you go into Mass Thors. We've seen more of that, so can kind of be argued that we have more mech-y transitions, but certainly not this fast. That many people are going from a 2-1-1 Hellbat build, and that itself is already out of meta, into going into mech, which isn't out of meta, it just is not really done at all. But a very cool build for a very cool player. And Solar, I don't know if he's going to be predicting this one. GuMiHo has quite the large book of builds that I'm sure Zerg's read back when it was like volume 1, but now it's volume 10 or 12, and they just probably have not been able to keep track of literally everything. And on the field right now, Solar is doing a decent job tracking his opponents. I say decent because, you know, the cancel on this 4th base does hurt. It takes care of the drop in the back and is now double expanding, so now would be almost guaranteed to get a 4th base, if not actually having enough units to secure both 4th and 5th. I love the illusion that GuMiHo is able to still keep up with this build, by the way, which, you know, by doing drops, this is kind of par for the course for a bio player who might be turtling back at home, but, you know, usually not mech turtling. So maybe if there was absolutely 0 things happening on the field, Solar would be scratching his head and actually checking around, but as long as it's the expected stuff, a couple of Marines, those leftover Hellbats from the earlier push, then what has he got to really think about? Maybe more Hellions at this point will be very suspicious. But even those have yet to be shown, I believe. Solar sees the... doesn't see, actually. Has the ability to see the fusion core. And that would have been a huge tell, but he doesn't actually see it. So, this is something. This is something. Tanks actually were not in position to shoot down that single Ling, which in a weird way is kind of good. I mean, I think Solar might be figuring it out with the Hellions. And just the general lack of gigantic bio army back at home. That would usually be helping to secure a fourth base like that. It's like the lack of things plus the Hellions, I think, is the most, like, in combination is rather damning. Maybe if it was just the Hellions, you'd be like, that's kind of weird, but whatever. Maybe if it was just the lack of army, I don't know, but I think he has picked up on it in the last minute. Hive is on the way. Spire as well, looking to get into a greater Spire by the appearance, which would do very well against someone who's still going into tank mech, but would not maybe do so well against someone who is actually going into battle cruisers. But GuMiHo is kind of all over the place. GuMiHo is not anywhere close to maxed out, but is getting all the things, which is dangerous. If you don't have a steady supply of army units while you try to go for all the things, you're basically hoping that your opponent doesn't push into you. Which, so far, so good, because Solar is also kind of getting his ducks in a row. But eventually, Solar will push, and GuMiHo still being sub 150 supply makes me very worried for his chances to hold. I mean, GuMiHo is getting upgrades for his bio, he's getting barracks for ghosts, he's getting more command centers, again, all before adding on any more factory units. Literally nothing on the production tab except a single battlecruiser, as far as army units go. And this just seems insanely greedy. Insanely greedy. Moon Dance can be a very turtly map, but as we see here, it's not like there are only chokes to play around with. Also, what really needed was a decent attack point, which he found, and then boom, there you have it. GuMiHo now down almost 100 supply. I feel like if he just didn't do all the things, you know? If he actually chose just in the battlecruisers with the mech, or just in a ghost with the mech, then he would have been okay. And you might be saying, well, he was down in gas, so, like, what does it really matter? Well, of course, could have not gotten those upgrades. Could have not gotten a battlecruiser. And at the end of the day, could have still gotten a lot more Hellions, which are buffered as Hellbats. Of course, not Hellions, but the Hellbats are buffered. They do help. It was like a lot of not useful things are being produced for the right here, right now, which means you are susceptible. Means you're weak. And you have to consider that. And GuMiHo kind of considered it with the way that he had set up. He was hoping his SimCity and spread would cover against a drastically superior Zerg force. But as we saw, that was clearly not the case. So, I don't know. It felt a little bit directionless. You know, you can get all the things once you're secure. So 4 bases, 170-ish supply, I think, would be kind of secure. And he didn't want to get there first. So maybe pure old-fashioned greed. He really thought that he would get away with it, or a little bit directionless. Like, okay, maybe I should have only done this or that, because I'm sure GuMiHo is still experimenting with such things. But yeah, that is kind of a quick game number 2. One-sided at the end of the day. And Solar will now even up the score. Now a tied series, 1-1, going on to Data C. In the top right, it is Solar. Bottom left, we have GuMiHo. So Psystorm representing the Gumi God, and Solar now being represented by Onside. Just not for the timing of this Open Cup, which was Saturday night. I want to try and do, like, well, the time of this being released versus the time of this being recorded versus the time of the actual games. That's going to get weird. So, very weird TvZ so far. And not only because of the Terran. Not only because it's GuMiHo. GuMiHo is a weird guy. Terrans kind of, you know, are more prone to leading the matchups, or I guess this matchup more so. But yeah, leading the matchup. So do they go for the Banshee? Do they go for the 2-1-1? Do they go for the 3cc? Zerg's more often than not going to be more so reacting to that. But it's not just GuMiHo making things odd. It is Solar as well. Solar, the first game at the very least, going for a 2-base Spire after a pool first was quite the decision. It is, as I was saying, like a very hard decision. This is what I'm going to go for. This is what I'm going to sacrifice, and it's a decent amount of sacrifice to do that. That didn't work out very much at all. The second game, Solar was actually rather normal. Not much to talk about there. But GuMiHo, he did a Hellbats 2-1-1, which really failed. It freaking failed. But even then, he was able to roll out of it, I think, fairly well. The back base on Moondance really helps out, but then... that's pretty much, I guess that's pretty much it. Like, there is no opening for Solar to try and jab, unless GuMi were to take one of those forward bases. And maybe Solar wouldn't even care to jab in the first place, really was more so looking to get maxed out. Which GuMiHo, with a couple of follow-up drops, really, I think, did a good job keeping tabs on it. It was the weirdest throwaway units I've ever seen, but it kind of kept tabs on all the bases. And then it also maybe kept up that impression, again, that he was actually going to go into bio. If Solar had known for a fact after the first Hellbat push failed that this was going to go into mech, maybe he actually does go into a break sooner. But then it's easily argued that, you know, as long as the Terran player is only on 3 bases, I shouldn't try to force it, right? Like, if they're going to turtle on 3 bases, they're probably going to be okay. It's when they reach towards a 4th, reach towards a 5th, that's usually when more openings arise. And certainly that was the case there. Because GuMiHo is doing a weird thing, into a weirder thing, into the weirdest / greediest thing, which was just no armor units. It's not advisable in a war game, I guess. So what do we got for this game? GuMiHo almost assuredly going to be playing, once again, differently to everything before. In this case, it is different from both the last game. So that first game, he did go for a reactorless factory, but then added a tech lab to the barracks to get the faster Banshees and Cloak. This time around, the reactor is being used by the barracks. So I'm going to predict a medevac Marine Cyclone. It could be a tank. I don't like the tank as much. Or it could be nothing. Okay. Alright then. So medevac drop of Marines into a 2-base push. Okay. Alright, so Maru was actually doing this, I believe, fairly often. Maru is doing a lot of 2-base builds against his Zerg opponents, Ragnarok and then Solar. If I remember correctly, he did it versus Ragnarok, and it was a real bamboozle. Poor guy stood no chance. And then versus Solar, I think what Maru ended up doing was keeping up the appearance that it was a 2-base attack, but then it actually wasn't, if I remember correctly. Still, Solar got kind of bopped. It's really got a nemesis in Maru. So what I'm trying to say is that it seems like it is a popular build right now. So Zerg players might be actually in tune with it. And as much as there are reasons as to why this can be a good build to push off that 3rd CC first and do either an actual 2-base push, like all in, or do the 2-base into 3cc, what we see right now. At the end of the day, I do believe that it's still a little dependent on not being scouted, not even scouted, just not being kind of kept in pace with. The Zerg player is able to identify exactly what your plans are from here on out based off this first medevac drop. They're going to choose everything correctly. They're going to choose when to drone correctly, when to build army correctly, right? And that's just not what you really want. So a Terran player, you know, is often tasked with doing different things in this matchup. Although I think Clem is, like, pretty much straight and narrow. But it's, you know, a lot of other Terran players would definitely try and mix things up and confuse the Zerg, but this might not be as confusing as the first couple of times that it was shown. And let's see if Solar is in touch with what's going on. That first medevac drop could be 2-base follow-up. Actually, he's able to see the 3rd CC on location building, so, you know, pretty good scouting there. GuMiHo had to realize that was going to be scouted, although not canceled, so that's still good news for GuMiHo. So Solar should know more so what this is about. And just keep on the straight and narrow path, actually. Which, you know, is getting this fourth base up and running. Which, so far, not so good. Fourth base actually gets killed right there, not canceled. That is not what Solar wanted. And GuMiHo has played this initial part of the build, I think, very well. You know, the medevac that went into the main base did barely nothing, but this task squad getting the fourth base, I think that is their task, is really annoying. It is starting to damage Solar, as he is once again denied for a little while on that base. I think the drone just didn't actually get queued into a hatchery, but now we got a hatchery on the way. But it was after a cancel. So, or a kill. Like a straight up kill. That's pretty bad. And GuMiHo did not even run away all that much. Despite a very good surround, just picks up, moves away. Says, okay, whatever, dude. Jumps back in, gets a queen, but loses one of the medevacs, so at least somewhat of a trade there for Solar, who can now finally breathe a sigh of relief and say, okay, I'm going to get this fourth base up and running, and should maybe even be looking towards a fifth very soon. Going to go into Ling, Baneling, Hydra. Back on the Terran side of things, that 3cc setup coming out fairly quickly thanks to being on location, despite having faster 3 barracks setup. Now going into the 4th and 5th barracks, upgrades are on the way, but going to be behind compared to Solar, who did emphasize those upgrades this time around. Big ol' run by being set up too from Solar that GuMiHo is not prepared for. He's very oh well, no, he's taking the high ground actually, so he's fine. I think this will be enough. If it was just the tank on the low ground, well, there you have it. That just dies. And the Marines barely hold on to the choke. So, okay. Good enough. Good enough. That was a lot of lings, you know, even though a tank loss hurts. That was a lot of lings. Speaking of tanks, very nasty tank position that GuMiHo is trying to abuse in the top side. And again, able to pick up to escape from that full surround. Looks like some of the creep spread has been cleaned up as well. So there's a little more to go to actually have Solar on the true back heels, I guess. He's already in a kind of difficult situation. Really having trouble trying to figure out how to dislodge this tank. Ends up not being able to, so loses the hatchery. Tried to save it for a hot second. Realized that was not going to happen. Just completely avoids the fights, which, if you were going to completely avoid the fight, you would have hoped to have done it before you tried to save it. Before you put a lot of lings and banelings and even queens into the fight that lost their lives. GuMiHo seems to be all over this one. Drones going down to the drop in the bottom right. I think just the appetizer. This base will always be a little vulnerable. Solar doesn't have a lot of units to spread around right now, and some of that is due to lackluster larva. Not getting that 4th base up as soon as he wanted to, not getting a macro hatchery, not getting a 5th base up all that particularly quickly, right? Like, that has led to larva issues. A Zerg player at this level oftentimes won't need a macro hatchery because they do have all of the bases necessary up and running at the very least, even if they're not mining. Well, occasionally it still hurts. Temporary relief on the bank with the inclusion of the hive. Expensive to get into that. Oh, and decent cleanup, it looks like, finally happening in the top side. And then the hydras also do help actually spend that money. So banelings, hydras, hive on the way, finally planting back down the original 4th base, having this one at the very least mining, and will be a 5th again soon. Solar's keeping up, but it's kind of like watching a boxer who's not really getting a whole lot done, who now is just standing up. Like, literally, that is the one thing you credit to him. You're like, well, you're up, and your fists are up, and I guess you can throw a punch, or you can defend against something, but I don't know how good it's gonna be. It's a little sketch. Solar is the one that's more in trouble. This GuMiHo has gone 5 bases, going into 5 bases. On 4, going to 5, there we go. 2-2 is about to finish as well. And Solar might actually still be able to have an upgrade lead. It looks like he's going to be able to save enough to start 3-3 should he want to immediately, but it's still a very scary scenario. Solar once again missing creep spread in some very important locations. Having to deal with a couple of drops that have been nuisances. And then also having to deal with a big old push on the right side this time. GuMiHo making sure to use the most obnoxious tank spots possible. Looks like there might be enough Ling Baneling, or maybe not. So there is a depth of tanks that Solar is wary of. He doesn't know how far that depth goes, but he knows there's more than one tank shooting. So could be 3, could be 4, could be 7 for all he knows. And that is causing some doubts in his ability to actually take care of things. So he abandoned ship on that base, which I think he had to do anyways. Eventually these tanks would have leapfrogged forward and actually gotten that base anyways. So he abandoned his other base. Again, kind of fighting for it a little bit, which sucks. Then eventually lose it anyways. Losing access to his natural a little bit here, losing drones in the natural. The Baneliness actually did not go down, but the drones are going down. The push to the bottom side continues forward. And again, GuMiHo is just firing away on the macro. 5 bases done, could easily transport it over to the right side. That's exactly what he's going to do. And that 3-3 did start up faster than Solar, who I think was choosing to build army and then a lurker den as the priority, which, also finishing his +1 missile attack, which I think all makes sense. It just, it's still just a tough spot, right? Like, the 3-3 would not have helped, I think, all that much. I think lurkers have the ability to help all that much. I think they are a bit of a comeback unit, more than just these upgrades are. Because even if you were a little ahead of the Terran, you're usually not that far ahead, and Terran's 3-3 is just scarier. At adding a couple of spellcasters, add in eventually a handful of lurkers, and Solar would have the army to make the comeback happen, but he can't get there. He is being attacked on multiple fronts, looks like cleaning him up on multiple fronts as well, but taking bigger losses while taking care of everything. Can't even get these last 3 medevacs. Looks like he will get the last few tanks, which is nice, but GuMiHo still has 5. And they are coming along once again. Scan reveals a rather small army. No Banelings. My tank gets destroyed. Solar is starting to get these little pickoffs that if the supplies were only 20 supply different, I'd be like, oh, very important. But at 40 supply difference, most of that in army, this could be it for Solar. Indeed, I believe it is. Can't even get to a single lurker to try and hold on. Even then, one lurker would not make the difference. GuMiHo playing some very good TvZ. This one still a little bit off, right? Not like a regular 3cc or 2-base Banshee build or something like that, but was still more of a macro game and wasn't as tricky as the previous attempts. And so the most important thing was that GuMiHo didn't really let go of the aggression, the momentum, and it was able to macro very well behind all of that, which when it comes to GuMiHo, certainly, I think most of the doubt for this guy's performance is in his mechanical abilities. So you always wonder, okay, does he depend on tricks? Can he actually play out a typical 3cc build well enough to defeat an opponent? And well, this time around, he certainly did. Looked very good in doing so. And now leads the series 2-1. Heading on to Stargazers for Game 4. In the top left, it is Solar. In the top right, we have GuMiHo. GuMiHo playing some good StarCraft, the mechanical level, just played last game more so than the previous 2, which had a couple of weirder things going on, I guess. Well, the first game still had a lot of typical mechanics of TvZ, I guess. Second game was just the real outlier where yeah, the transition on mech was so weird. Anywho, we do also know that Solar is basically on a bit of a downswing right now. Solar was always the player who I guess could be labeled. I mean, it sounds mean. I wouldn't want to discuss this with him in person, but yeah, could be the player that was full of potential and never quite reached it. And he's still playing, and I believe that any downturn that he has, he will eventually bounce back, but I think a lot of Solar fans might agree that the potential was and is still insanely high for this Zerg player, but hasn't actually manifested into, well, too many championships. He did actually technically win 2, I want to say. Maybe an SSL and a DreamHack, I believe, a long time ago. But it's still, compared to what, especially some tournaments start off as like Solar beating on the rest of the players, looking unbeatable himself, and it kind of fizzles out as he gets to the round of 8, round of 4. It can be a disappointing career to track. And for Solar, he usually does bounce back immediately afterwards. He's once again looking untouchable in the early stages of tournaments, and just a little a little out of reach as far as championships goes. Maybe meet some of his nemesis, such as Maru. Sure, that happens. Just that right now, it does seem like maybe some stuff happening in real life. He's talked about that after Valencia, or kind of during Valencia, I guess. It's keeping him a little more suppressed than usual. So again, sometimes he won't do so hot, but he'll bounce back. And now it's like, well, he's not doing hot, he's not doing hot, he's not doing hot. Hopefully he bounces back. Because I am talking about a less than 3 months scenario. If he still hadn't bounced back after like a full year, I mean, we start to reevaluate the player, don't we? We don't give him, I guess, as much credit. We just say, okay, their time's a little bit past. I don't think it's true for Solar, but it could be, you know, if he continues to underperform in these major tournaments and the premier tournaments. Anyways, like I said, not exactly a feels-good conversation to be having if you were talking with Solar, but I do think it is mostly accurate. Solar is just a little disappointed in his own career, not quite hitting those highs that I think was very possible. Yet still always being a player that as soon as you're like, well, I just don't think he'll do it, he's like, no, I gotcha, bitch. Like, I'm gonna totally wreck face. Doesn't seem to be that player right now in this best of 5. GuMiHo kind of leading that last game very well. Able to close it out too, no major mistakes made. Now gonna go into the 3cc build. Very greedy 3cc build. And then getting actually kind of a secretive starport, which is interesting. I guess this, much as I talked about Solar, I should also talk about GuMiHo's career. So Solar, I think because he is also a very, like, mechanically gifted player, we talk a lot about how just good he is in general, not necessarily a trickster, right? Unlike GuMiHo, who we definitely label as a trickster. When we talk about his performance not being quite, you know, quite up to the usual, it's a concern. When we talk about GuMiHo, it's like, well, where the fuck is he? Like, who knows? Sometimes he is the championship contender. Sometimes he gets absolutely bopped, goes down 0-2. His weird builds don't do very much, or his totally normal builds don't look very powerful. And perhaps going back to some of the mechanical arguments that could be had about GuMiHo. And I think when he won his GSL, he was both you know, an inventor, an original Terran, but he was also very good on the mechanics. It's kind of like a, I don't know exactly where he's at. From case to case, best of 5 to best of 5. So, yeah. It's like, GuMiHo has spikes, Solar has curves, I suppose, on these graphs, these skill graphs. This Battlecruiser build, I mean, it's only one Battlecruiser, so I don't think it's going to end the game, but Solar could be, he could severely drop the ball, right? He's already down on his last life. These Hellions get him a little bit more trouble than you would hope, and 3 of them survive. Maybe the Battlecruiser jumps into the main, there's no Spore Crawler in the mineral line. And then suddenly things just don't look good. I mean, they're not game over, but once again, GuMiHo is the one leading the game. And he is going to go to mech after this as well. Very greedy opener, right? Very dependent on scouting to tell him, like, maybe you get a Banshee instead of a Battlecruiser, but not even in that. I'm thinking more of the building placement. So he actually takes the natural here, and then he takes the third and the corner base instead of maybe taking it in the safe base, which a lot of people would do, but he figures he can get away with it. The aggression applied with the Battlecruiser that did jump into the main base, by the way. Plus the Hellions will keep Solar back at home for an extended period of time. As long as the Battlecruiser is alive, Solar can't go aggressive. Unless he flooded a lot of Lings, in which case Hellions are great against Lings, aren't they? Case in point, we do have the Hellions darting into the natural, getting a couple of good shots on the Lings, although not all beautiful, so they will be cleaned up. Solar did have enough Lings at least to do that. But again, you'd have to dedicate so many across the map to hopefully take down someone who's building non-stop Hellions and a Battlecruiser that's, you know, going to free fire from above. Spore Crawler wasn't available at the third base, so some extra damage being done there. An unfortunate disconnect by the looks of things. Not maybe the most important timing, though, is the good news. The Battlecruiser was being tracked. There's not much more micro that Solar could have done, and the Hellions were already taken care of. But the Battlecruiser, unfortunately, it really is kind of just this is how it is, right? The battlecruiser, unless it goes up against someone for a faster spire, or simply put, is severely mishandled, is bound to do exactly this. Run along the back lines, have the queens chase them, and then successfully escape. Because they're so tanky. There's still better and worse responses and defenses against the battlecruiser build, of course, but the battlecruisers are kind of doing their job. The Hellions, they now held bats, actually adding a lot more complication as well. Maybe not full-on damage, but if the queens are over there, then the queens aren't stopping this battlecruiser from running around the spore on top of the drones. Ling run by again, it seems so unsuccessful. And it's hard to get a Ling run by going. Roach run by, maybe could have done something before battlecruiser teleported out, but that's it's all good things for GuMiHo and pretty much all bad things for Solar. Solar not only took damage to all of that, was probably delayed on his 4th base, probably delayed on a lot of this creep spread, certainly delayed on any mid-game aggression. Doesn't even have the Roachmorn done. Spire finishes up, take care of the battlecruisers, and that is important. If there's one battlecruiser from GuMiHo, you do have to be wary of a mech play. And if it's a mech play, it's going to be 3 battlecruisers. As soon as you saw 2, you know it's going to be more than 2. I was going to say 3 again, because I usually where Terrans stop on mech play, but actually some Terrans been going up to 4 or even 5. And GuMiHo would be the type of player, I think, to actually try and go mass battlecruiser. So, it doesn't stop at 4 or 5 either. It actually just continuously builds them and eventually trades out his ground army. So that's why I had to kind of hesitate. But usually it is 3. At the very least, you're going to get 4. Solar needs to make sure to have enough corruptors at any given time to deal with the correct number of battlecruisers, right? So he thinks 11 is totally fine against 3 battlecruisers with Yamato, but then suddenly it's 4 that actually can snowball, kind of. But, it's not as snowbally as like Muton, Muta, or Phoenix and Phoenix, but it's like initially the Zergs saying, yeah, I got this. Okay, teleported that one. Okay, teleported that. Oh shit, okay, I only have 2 corruptors left. That's where things are a little sketch. This game as a whole is very sketch for Solar. GuMiHo has gotten away with so much. Took a 4th base, again, not in that back pocket base, so that's free to take later on. Lost a barracks, but not really important. He does have his 7 factories, excuse me. So all the factories he really needs. And Solar has got not a lot. Not maxed out. 82 drones is okay. But not maxed out. No upgrades quite yet. And it's not like he is out supplying GuMiHo. Maybe you're not maxed out, but you still have 34, 40 more army supply. You still can run into the mech player. Not this case. Not in this game. And we got a 5th battlecruiser on the way. Dedication to continued ground attack weapons, so not a full transition over to battlecruisers, but maybe eventually. And a couple more drones went down to some Hellions, going for the roasty toasty. GuMiHo is perfectly content sitting back right now. Held that Cyclone, could do a little bit on the field. A couple of lock-ons on Corruptors is big money, actually. It's very expensive losses. But this is not the army that's going to move across the map and win the game, right? It is just looking for little bits of damage. Now GuMiHo is building up to more of an army that's ready to go across the map with more tanks on the way. And Solar needs to get up to that hive. Needs to get some additional tools to help him out here. Vipers or Fungals from Infestors. Both are pretty nice. A little Parasite even. The point is spellcasters. Spellcasters are necessary to stop this mech push. And we are not there yet. Certainly no intent on going into no Parasite, as we can see. Are we going to pop out 4 Vipers as soon as possible? But then it's a real humdinger about who, what, where, how to actually use the Viper's abilities. Do you abduct battlecruisers that can teleport out? Do you blinding cloud the tanks? Well, then how far can you blinding cloud them if the Vipers are running forward into Cyclone fire and battlecruiser fire? Do you parasitic bomb? Probably never. It's not really worth it on battlecruisers. It's just, you're gonna need a lot of Vipers to do all the things, because they're also probably gonna die in their attempt to do all the things. So as I see one on the way, I'm not convinced. One Viper against all of this. Sketch. And GuMiHo continues to expand willy-nilly, no worries anywhere. Takes his pocket base, takes the bottom right base. Might even be looking to take this gold base, because that'll just be an advanced point of defense as he continues to leapfrog forward. Now, GuMiHo is on a bit of a timer. And I say a bit of, not because it's 5 minutes versus 10 minutes, but rather, it's not that important of a timer, I'd say. Broodlords are on the way. Broodlords great against tanks, great against Cyclones as well. Cyclones aren't supposed to get locked in and then actually able to escape. But they're not so great against battlecruisers. So you need the proper combination of Broodlord, Corruptor, and whatever else you have to actually win out here. Already one battlecruiser going down bodes well for potential transition, but really no damage done to the depth of tanks. This might have looked successful on this front line right here, but that was just there was a drape hiding everything else behind it. So it's not actually all that impressive. Solar is able to get maxed out again, but again, on these kind of, frankly, inferior units. That is the situation when you get to a maxed out mech player. You're supposed to have one of the best armies in the game. And then unless you're also on your own tier 3 army, so again, maybe Broodlord, Corruptor, Viper, and Neural Parasite, actually, in case you get into Thors. I think that'd be mostly useful. Then you're going to have to throw bodies at your opponent, which is exactly what Solar's trying to do. Just throw units across and hope they get some decent connections. But again, frontline tanks go down fairly fast. Backline tanks all firing away, totally unharmed. And even these units here, the Hellions and Cyclones, continuing to be a nuisance. Anytime the Corruptors think that, oh, well, we can at least die for these battlecruisers, right? Oh, 6 Cyclone lock-ons are going to dissuade you from that. And as I was saying, GuMiHo's probably looking to take this gold base. And that's exactly what he's doing, continuing to advance forward via the bottom half of Stargazers, using a combination of the mobile mech units and the stationary siege units to really throw the Zerg player in for a loop, basically. They're, again, so difficult to decide exactly how to play against this when there's a lot of factors involved. Eventually, they might get to ideal armies for both of them. It might make things more complicated, but from what I see right now, it is certainly more ideal for GuMiHo. Does lose yet another battlecruiser that's full of 3 that have gone down, but GuMiHo, you know, behind all of this aggression, he could have been going into Thors at the fear of the Broodlords. He's actually just going to go into more battlecruisers. 5 battlecruisers are on the way. Solar is still making more so ground army. Ling, Baneling, Ravager. He did remake some Corruptors, but only 10 are available now, as a few of them turn into Broodlords, obviously. And GuMiHo is going to have the best late game army that's really possible. Fully upgraded battlecruisers and Thors. And maybe Hellbats, I guess? I don't know how much you can beat that. Cyclones are once again doing their thing, getting lock-ons, so the Corruptors think they can go after the battlecruisers. And then Solar tries to take care of the ground army as well. But this time, while there are only a few tanks, it's enough with the terrain of the map to just have Solar back away, realizing he won't be able to, you know, take this out all willy-nilly, easily. Trying to use his Broodlord, singular, that just died. And now gonna actually punch it, as I think he might have been able to do previously, but I can understand his hesitation. But more battlecruisers are on the way. We're up to 8 right now. Many of them still being saved as they take damage. Many of them, you know, having Yamato as they pop out, right? And it is turning into an all-air mech army. One thing that Solar is not prepared to deal with. He doesn't have that big of a bank. He's trying to rebuild his Corruptors, but I think he also has been rather lackluster on their upgrades. Yeah, currently only at 1-1. No additional upgrades on the way. It just seems like that might be the eventual killing blow. Is a mass battlecruisers, 20 battlecruisers jumping on top of the Zerg army. Scary stuff. Solar almost cheekily taking his base back. Didn't actually ever get to mine from it. Gonna take some free Thors, says why not? But here come the battlecruisers. Many of them injured, actually. And even some Corrosive Biles helping out by the looks of things. But that is just not enough Corruptors. Coming in one at a time as well. Managed to take down one more battle cruiser. Parasitic bomb, like I said, not actually all that impactful. And despite Solar being on an even supply with some economy still left over, decides that this is not a game that he is going to win, which is pretty much the case. Gotta agree with Solar right there. Had he managed to maybe buy more time to build up to 20 Corruptors, well, then he's still playing a very long game against someone who is going to just be more successful with it, unless he drastically messed up with his battlecruiser micro. So it's going to be more cost efficient as they both start to run out of bases. Battlecruisers keep themselves alive. So saw the future for a brief second and decided to tap out then and there. So GuMiHo does win the Korean Open Cup. I think it was 137 of this week, kind of last week, whatever. I guess it depends on when you think weeks start and end. And that is another one under his belt. GuMiHo has actually been playing quite a few, and he's won quite a few. So Solar, he got to the finals against some other very good Korean players, and I think even a couple of Europeans, I want to say. But he is still a little less than maybe like championship winning Solar levels, which he's been before. So losing to GuMiHo, it's not a mark on your report card. You don't have to send it home and get it signed, because GuMiHo is a very good player and a very tricky player as well. But I do think that Solar of the past might have played some of these games a little bit cleaner, a little bit smoother, and instead it was just kind of quickly into a depressing note. None of the fire I might have seen from Solar doing some of his best runs in tournaments. Hopefully he is on the up and up, and hopefully GuMiHo continues to play a lot of StarCraft, because he is fun to watch. Hopefully you guys enjoyed watching him as well. If you liked the video, do all the things for YouTube. Like, subscribe, comment, all the good stuff. And I'll see you for more StarCraft casts in the very near future. Bye, guys.